Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's another week. It's Natha Perkins of Electra Astrology. We are continuing our work on Pallas Athena, the asteroid. We all have Pallas Athena energy in our charts, and we're all working with this energy in one way or another throughout our lives. Sometimes it's really strong, and sometimes it's not strong. But what we're going to talk about today is one of the places where it can be particularly strong for all of us, whether we are more masculine in nature or more feminine in nature. And that is because we are talking about the Pallas Athena connection to the father figure, to the male authority figures in our lives. And that can get very complicated, as you know. So before we dive in, we are in a massive time of transformation. 2025 is slated to be one of the biggest years that we are all going to be working with. So as we're all doing these bigger questions about our mission and purpose and what it is that we're supposed to be doing, we're all in a time of flux. And I know that because I talk to so many of you. We all have these dreams and hopes and visions and aspirations that we are wanting to bring into fruition. And then we also have these fears and doubts and places where we're experiencing inconsistencies and we don't have the answers. So we are riding the waves of both sides of the spectrum. But the reason that I am bringing these teachings to you is to help you explore your internal world on a deeper level. We've been conditioned that it's all out there and that everything that we want and need and should believe and have experienced is outside of us. And there is plenty that's outside of us, but the real work, the real integration comes from exploring what's inside. And as we're getting more immersed in this time where we're looking at things through screens, and there's a whole other version of intelligence on this planet that we know about, and that's artificial intelligence. And I would say that there are a lot of different versions of intelligence that we don't even know about that are here on this planet. And, this is all very confusing. And our brains are having to evolve to understand what's going on. And we still won't be able to fully understand what's going on, probably for many years, but we can work to fully understand what's going on internally. We all have very rich internal experiences and lives, and everything that seems to be outside of us is out of our control. And everything that is inside of us is where we find the richness and the understanding and the answers that we seek. So that is why I'm bringing all of these teachings to you. If you have missed any of the 12 sun signs that I went through in deep detail, I release those on my podcast, Star Narratives, and I am re-releasing them in edited form on YouTube under Astrology for Awakening, which is the playlist that this talk is under if you're on YouTube. If you're on Star Narratives, I am covering these teachings along with an astrology forecast. The astrology forecast is released separately on YouTube on Mondays. In a time where anything can appear to be anything, we really are seeing magic before us. And moving forward into 2025, as both Neptune and Saturn move into Aries, we will get more clarity, but we have been practicing over the last year and a half as the North Node has been traveling through Aries. And since 2018, as Chiron has been traveling through Aries, this Aries energy is about learning how to partner with self, learning how to understand our own perceptions and our own identity on a deeper level, because at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is what our guts have to say to us. We are in a time where we're beginning to see how we've handed our power over to external authority figures and how they have not done a good job of wielding that power. And so that leads me into Pallas Athena and what we're going to talk about today. So take a deep breath and come into this present moment and be with yourself. Tune into your nervous system. I had a wonderful meeting with a client today, and we were talking about the nervous system and how it is this entire world, this entire ecosystem that many of us don't know very much about. We don't understand our nervous system. We don't understand how delicate it is and what the tolerance is, how much we can tolerate of certain things, and how little we need of other things. So take a minute and just tune into your nervous system and notice, what does it feel like to be in your body right now, especially as we're talking about extreme transformation. And we're playing with the difference between being hopeful, being excited, being confident, and being frightened, worried, and dull, because we're riding all of that right now. All of that is residing within our nervous system, and we can't control too much of what is going to stimulate us out there. But we have to work on even noticing when we have become overstimulated, when we are merged in with somebody else's energy, when we are in codependency and we are trying to make ourselves feel better by making someone else feel better first. There's all of these complicated ways that we are all trained into working with our nervous systems, and it's not that complicated. It can be very simple, but the first step is to tune in, to notice what's going on with your nervous system in any given moment. By the way, if you like my style, you can book with me at electraastrology.com. I also offer mentorships and apprenticeships. So I want to talk about Pallas Athena. This time we're going to talk about Pallas Athena as connected to the father or the male authority figure. So if you remember in episode 1 of Pallas Athena, I talked about how she was a goddess that was born out of her father Zeus's head, out of Jupiter's head. And remember that Jupiter was the god of the skies. He was very controlling, and he did not want anybody to come between him and his power. He believed a prophecy that the child of the goddess Metis would succeed him in power. And so he swallowed Metis. She was at the time pregnant with Pallas Athena. Pallas Athena comes out of Zeus's head, and she is in full armor. So she comes out as she's already very, very powerful. So when we're looking at Pallas Athena in our own natal chart, and we're seeking out that feminine warrior energy, we talked in episode 2 about how even though Mars, which is the masculine warrior energy, can be really pushy and win the battle by being strong and assertive, rushing into action, guns blazing, how that actually isn't the most effective way to win battles. And if we can lean into our Pallas Athena, which is more about using our strategy and insight and wisdom, we can actually get in, win the battle without causing extra chaos. We aren't leaving the carnage behind us because we have negotiated the win without upsetting people, because we were using our minds instead of our guns. So when we look at Pallas Athena as a relationship to the father energy, so I'm going to give you some examples of how this can look. A lot of times when I have clients that have strong Pallas Athena energy in their chart, we're looking at women, and I'm going to use women as the primary example because the asteroids are so feminine in nature. These are women that were raised in families where there were more boys than girls. These are women that are in careers where there are more men than women. So, for example, this might be the lone girl that goes out for the soccer team on a team full of boys. Or this might be the single sister in a family of boys. Now, we've all had experiences like that where we have been the only one in a group of people that were different than we were. Maybe that was being the only English speaker in a group. Maybe that was being the only American in a group. Maybe that was being the only person with your particular skin color in a group. This is the energy of looking around and saying, I am different, and I'm going to have to prove myself, probably more than the other people are going to have to prove themselves because of my differences. And because I am unlike the rest in this group, there can be a need to earn respect. And when we look at Pallas Athena, she's born as a goddess, the only goddess that has come from a male. She's born into a family of boys and she wants to curry her father's favor. And so she has to figure out how to get in there and get on Zeus's good side. Remember, this was the child that was prophesized to succeed him in power. So this can also be the energy of the girl who became the tomboy to fit in with her father, who knew that the only way to get time with her father was maybe by joining the basketball team so that he could coach, or becoming interested in sports so that they could watch it together, or helping him mow the lawn so they could spend quality time. So that part of you that felt as if you couldn't really be yourself, but you wanted the relationship, you wanted the respect, you wanted the authority figure or the dominating group to see you for who you were and to love you and to accept you. And so you were willing to change yourself a little bit to be a part of that system. This is your Pallas Athena. And this is the part of you that knew that you had to think outside of the box in order to fit in. This is also a dynamic that you might have experienced in adolescence. And you were looking at a group of friends that you wanted to be a part of, and you had to contort yourself a little bit to get in with them. This is the energy where we have to rely on our skills. We aren't fighting a battle like we talked about last week, but we are pushing our way in. We are working hard to get what we want, even though we have started at somewhat of a deficit, or we have started off being different, or somehow we haven't had the respect. We don't get the respect right off the bat, and we have to prove ourselves. And the Pallas Athena in your chart, and I recommended last time that you go to astro.com and go under extended chart selection, and you can pull up Pallas Athena and you can see which sign and which house Pallas Athena is in your chart, because that will give you a very good indication of where your Pallas Athena skill sets are. So for example, my Pallas Athena is in the sign of Pisces, which means that I'm really good at intuiting. What do I need to be? Who do I need to impress? How do I need to get my foot in the door here? And you also have Pallas Athena skills that show up in your chart. We also know that it is okay to change ourselves. It is okay to figure out a way to get in, to get to the top, to dominate in a field that wasn't traditionally our field. But eventually, we're going to have to do some healing around that, because when we push ourselves in the door and we have strapped on all of our strength and all of our wisdom and our intelligence to figure out how to get in, eventually we're going to reach a place where we feel that we want to be ourselves again. And we want people to respect us for who we are, not because we are efforting so hard. We tend to, and we've been trained in all of these different ways. You can listen to my Virgo episodes. I also cover it extensively in my Capricorn episodes, where we talk about that drive to be seen as successful and that drive to make authority figures like us and want us to be around. And we know that in a time, especially right now, where we are learning not to outsource our value to authority figures, especially, that we have to go seeking that value internally. And with Pallas Athena, because she was born fully armored, I mean, that's a metaphor right there, isn't it? I think that we're all born fully armored in some way, and we learn very quickly that we have to have measures of self-protection. Otherwise, we're going to get hurt and tossed around and abandoned. So part of doing the Pallas Athena work is also seeking to understand where your own barriers are, where your own armor is. We have to be able to see ourselves clearly. We have to be able to trust ourselves that we're going to make the right decision, that we're going to steer the ship in the right direction. And when we stop outsourcing our approval and our value from authority figures, oh my God, then we actually have to be the authority, because then it becomes less about me trying to impress you or me trying to impress my boss or my father. And it becomes more about me understanding that their being impressed really doesn't mean anything anymore. And that who I'm really seeking to impress is myself. But we're not trying to impress ourselves with, oh, you're so beautiful. You've made so much money. All of these trappings, as I talked about in the Venus episodes, both Taurus and Libra, how we put a lot of value on being young, rich, thin, and popular, and how those things are so superficial and so empty at the end of the day. So, part of doing our own authority work is seeking out the things about ourselves that we truly value. So, essentially, we don't want to stop outsourcing our authority to our bosses, our teachers, our parents, and then just outsource it to how successful am I? How thin am I? How many followers do I have? Because it's kind of the same, right? Anytime that we're looking at authority figures that are out there, people or objects, or even things like respect, there is an emptiness. We will keep hitting that wall of emptiness. We will keep finding the hopelessness, and then we will go into the fear. So we've been talking all year about this difference between choosing the path of fear and choosing the path of love. And that sounds very trite, and we're not dealing with triteness at all. But choosing the path of love means choosing the path where there is a relationship to a higher power, where there is a sweetness and a gratitude and a relaxation and a trust and a surrender into understanding that what is here is exactly what is needed, but that the more exploration into our inner world that we can do, the better. And in that same path lies our relationship to nature and to animals and to the elements. So you see, we can get very deep when we go towards love. And when we go towards love, that's where, again, we find the richness. We find that connection to our inner world and that connection to our higher power. And it's when we choose the path of fear that also carries all of those external empty trappings, worshiping of celebrity, worshiping of youth, following the crowd, buying the things, trusting the external authorities. And we're all beginning to see, like I mentioned earlier, that the trust that we generally have given the authority figures in our lives, they haven't done a very good job with it. They haven't kept the kingdom safe and secure. And so now it is our job to keep the kingdom safe and secure. I talked about this all through Leo season as I talked about our inner kingdom. And through Cancer season, I talked about our inner relationship to our queen. And so it forms this big ecosystem. And when we're examining our Pallas Athena, and we are once again saying, I've learned a lot. I've learned how to get my foot in the door. I've learned how to become a chameleon and to get my needs met. I've learned how to be a million different things, a million different versions of strong. And now I'm at a place where I'm ready to continue my relationship to strength, but I'm going to turn it inward, and I'm going to be insourcing my relationship to power and authority. And I'm going to base my authority on my morals, my values, and my personal ethics. And I'm going to do my best to live up to my standards. And so one thing that's so interesting is that this week we have a new moon in the sign of Capricorn, and it is conjunct Pallas Athena. I don't plan this stuff out. This is literally the magic of the universe at hand. We're talking about healing our patterns of external validation by stepping into our own authority via Pallas Athena with a new moon, the sun and the moon, the king and the queen, in the sign of Capricorn in a conjunction to Pallas Athena. Now, if you're listening to this in the future, you can think back to this last week in December of 2024. And what were you working with? What were your themes of reclaiming your power? And how were you needing to choose between taking that path towards love, towards cultivating and nurturing your inner world and your relationship to your higher power, versus the seductiveness of taking the path of fear? where everything was a worry and everything was a bother and you were not going to get what you wanted, right? These are the big themes that we are all playing with as we're moving into 2025. We will need to continue to explore these themes, especially if we're wanting to evolve, and we are. As I've been talking about in all these talks, we have these multiple timelines that we're all choosing to step into. And of course, there will be plenty of people that will choose the timeline of fear, and plenty of people, including yourself, if you're listening to this, that I would assume are going to choose the timeline of love. But in that timeline, it requires a substantial amount of seeing yourself clearly, seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly, seeing the places where you easily give away your power, where you just hand it on over. You smile and people please your way through something. You manipulate, you talk badly about people, you get angry and irritable with them, you lose patience, and you are not in a place of neutrality, right? And we all have that. So we need to be able to see our shortcomings in order to grow and evolve. And that is a part of seeing our inner world. That's a part of tuning in and saying, wow, I just totally gave my power away. Oh, wow, I was just totally snappy and crabby at that person, and it wasn't their fault. I just agreed to do something that I don't want to do, and now I'm going to complain about it to somebody else and make that person look bad. These are all the ways that we give into fear, and we need to be able to understand that. And I think that Pallas Athena is a really powerful archetype for helping us to really get it. How am I outsourcing my power? Why am I looking for approval from authority figures? What was going on through the course of my life? What were the situations that I was up against where I felt like I had to morph myself into somebody different in order to be accepted, in order to be loved, in order to get my divine birthright of love, right? Because think about the father, and technically a father is supposed to love their child. And technically, a child should not have to effort so hard to get the love of the father. And yet it happens a lot. And so this is a week, as you're thinking about this talk, of looking at your own unique strengths, the strengths that you have just because you're good, just because you've done the work, because you have learned the things and had the experience, and how you don't have to take anything that you've learned and try to use it to prove yourself. Because this is about turning all of that energy, all of that potent energy, I should say, toward your own self-love, your own self-respect, and your own self-trust. All right, well, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you all next week.